Is that Chris? Okay, I have the author of this piece, Christopher Alexander of the Louisiana Citizens Advocacy Group, on the line, and I'm going to bring him in. And Chris, this is an amazing article.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your covering it.
I know you called one of the guest hosts yesterday, and I don't think they had read the piece. I don't think they understood the importance to everyone in Louisiana. Because even if you don't have school-aged children, even if you don't get vaccinated, I promise you these bills that you have covered affect everyone in the state of Louisiana. But before I get too far ahead of myself, tell us about the Louisiana Citizens Advocacy Group.
Yes, it is a limited liability company. It's an organization we're forming that has one central mission, and that is to expose rhinos in the state legislature, the ones who often kill very good legislation in ways that it's very hard to discern on a voter scorecard. Because as you may know, a voter scorecard only records votes that went to the full chamber. And there are a number of ways to kill good legislation before it ever gets there, before it ever gets to a vote. And so what we're going to do, we are exposing the rhinos who are killing legislation in committee, either by an affirmative vote in committee or simply by not showing up for votes. And, of course, we're also recording what they actually vote for in the full chamber, because it's so important, because these rhinos are killing much-needed legislation and then going to their constituents and talking about what faithful conservatives they are. And their constituents very often do not know what is really going on there. Okay. And that's why I think our Citizens Advocacy Group is so important.
How can people get in touch if they want to donate or help or find out more? How do you get in touch with the Louisiana Citizens Advocacy Group?
Well, we're in the process right now of building our website and creating a donor portal. For now, I have my cell phone, which I'll be glad to give out, and my email to your listeners. And another thing that can be done is to spread the piece around, which is what you're doing, and so that all the constituents in these districts know what's really going on. Because I do believe that if the constituents knew what was really going on in the legislature, most of these liberal Republicans could not be reelected in Louisiana.
Exactly. And look, ladies and gentlemen, let me say, I often follow legislation, and this is a ton of work to track each bill, to summarize what it means, and then, and I'm not going to ask you to name any sources, but finding out exactly how it died, that's pretty tricky.
It is very tricky, and it's all a matter of public record. It's just a matter of going and doing the work, looking at the video of the committee sessions and going forward that way, and that's what we did. And it is one of those things where I think we're past the point of being able to nice guy our way to victory. We have got to be relentless in the way that we pursue these matters, or we're going to lose our freedom. And that's where we are in the country and certainly in our state. But my cell phone number, my name is Christopher Alexander, and my cell phone number is area code 225-333-6434. And my email is Chris, CHRIS, at jcalaw.us, Chris at jcalaw.us for now. But within the next 2 or 3 days, we will have our full advocacy portal set up on our website, and we are going to be off and running.
Okay, Chris, I'm told we cannot move the bottom of the hour break. Please stay on the line. I got a lot more I want to ask you and a lot more to talk about. And guys, you're listening to the Ringside Politics with a Punch show, guest hosted by Big John Mason. And we're going to go ahead and take the break, and we'll be right back.
Louisiana Radio Network News, I'm Kevin Gallagher. The U.S. Supreme Court issues a hold on Baton Rouge federal judge Shelley Dick's court order for state lawmakers to draw a new congressional district map that shows 2 majority black districts. State Attorney General Jeff Landry is happy about that. He says the High Court will be making hard rulings on district maps for Louisiana and Alabama later this year.
This is an issue that's going to be taken up by the United States Supreme Court, I believe, in the fall, along with the Alabama case that was staged some months ago, under which the facts are very, very similar to what we have here in Louisiana.
Baton Rouge State Senator Cleo Fields, a Democrat, authored one of the two black district maps. He says he's disappointed but continues to fight for districts to more accurately reflect the minority population of the state.
It appears that the Supreme Court is becoming more and more political. Why I'm very disappointed in the ruling of the Supreme Court. As I've said all along, we have to respect the ruling of the court.
I'm Kevin Gallagher. This is news from LRN.
A sizzling T-bone steak, a mouth-watering char-grilled hamburger, a slow-smoked brisket. There are plenty of reasons to grill beef this summer. With 29 cuts of lean, protein-packed beef to choose from, there's always something succulent to serve to your family. So this Independence Day weekend and all summer long, be the hero of your backyard barbecue by serving what everybody wants, the delicious taste of certified Louisiana beef. So remember, beef, it's what's for dinner. Brought to you by the Louisiana cattle producers through the Louisiana Beef Industry Council and the Beef Checkoff.
A deadly surge is plaguing our state, domestic homicides. Louisiana now ranks 5th nationally in these deaths. According to the NCADV, the presence of a firearm in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. But Louisiana has laws to help keep these weapons out of the hands of domestic abusers. Learn about the Firearm Divestiture Program by contacting your sheriff's office or visiting agjefflandry.com. This PSA was supported by subgrant number 5336, awarded by the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement for the Stop Forming the Grant Program.
Hi, this is Sidney Lee with AC Ambulance, and for over 40 years we have been taking care of your AC and heating needs. We proudly recommend Daikin equipment backed by a factory 12-year parts and labor warranty. So if you are in need of a repair, replacement, AC or heat checkup, don't take a chance, call the ambulance. That's AC Ambulance with the best financing in the industry. So call 467-1400. That's 467-1400.
It's Jeff Cruaire. After 21 years on the air and 21,000 interesting guests, I'm still fired up every day to host the Ringside Politics program. I take on all sides, take on the mainstream news media, the deep state, those who want to destroy our country. If you support this fight, I'd love for you to come on board as a sponsor of our show. You can reach our great audience and help sustain a program that will never be part of the liberal media. To participate, contact me at jeff@wgso.com. Thanks for your support.
Ringside Politics with a Punch is looking for a few open minds, but not so open your brains fall out. Call Jeff Cruaire at 556-9696 and expose your thoughts.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Ringside Politics with a Punch with special guest host, Big John Mason. I've got Chris Alexander on the line, who wrote an amazing article that's on thehayride.com. I'll give you the title if you want to Google it. It's Lots of Conservative Legislation Was Killed by Republicans This Year. And I've got someone that's waiting patiently on the line that called when I introduced Chris. We got Alan in Algiers. Hey, Alan,
Yes.
What's up?
Hi. I wanted to just quickly ask you about something that you mentioned about this. I'm concerned about this bill by Representative McCormick called Constitutional Carry, and it passed last year, but it died this year before it ever finished going through the process. And I contacted his office, and he said it was killed in the Senate. But I'm on the legislature website, and I don't know if you know, I'm sure you probably know about how you can look up a bill and you see the chronological order of all the steps that it goes through. And they told me that it died in the Senate because it didn't get the 2/3 vote. Like you were talking about, this other guy delayed this. I didn't know that, because it says having received 2/3 vote of the elected members, the House approved consideration after the 82nd calendar day. And I don't know what the significance of the 82nd calendar day is. Maybe you can explain that. But anyway, it said that the last step listed here is in the House, but McCormick told me that the last step was in the Senate, and that step is mysteriously missing from the chronological steps that the bill went through. He said it, and the thing, and somehow, even though that step is missing, it went back to the House and had that vote that you were talking about where you got to have 2/3, and it passed that. So you would think that if it passed that last step in the House, but this other previous step of the vote is missing, I'm confused. And why is that step missing, that the 2/3 vote in the Senate that supposedly failed? And if it did, why did it go back to the House and pass 78-16? If it passed, you would think that it would have gone to some other step where it finally was. What's the last step? I guess if it
passes both the House and the Senate, it goes to the governor's desk to be signed.
Right. So if you look at HB 37 and you look at the chronological steps, the last step it passed, and you would think that, but it somehow died. And so yeah, can you tell me about that thing where it says, what is the significance of the 82nd calendar day? The House approved consideration after the 82nd. Is that like towards the very end of the session?
Yeah, at the very end of the session, they only want to consider the important stuff. So it requires, unlike early in the legislative session, if it passes by one vote, it passes. But both the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate can decide when bills are brought to the floor. And if they wait too long, it now requires 2/3 votes instead of 50.01%. And look, I was a big supporter of this bill. And I was upset that we couldn't override the veto last year. But I haven't studied up. Chris, do you know?
Alan, thank you for the question and for your interest in this. My understanding, and again, I can confirm this with Representative McCormick, is that the bill originally passed the House committee and passed the full House and then went to the Senate. And in the Senate,
right,
the Senate can offer amendments to the bill. And I think that in the Senate, perhaps an amendment or two was offered to the bill, and then once the amendments are approved by the Senate, then it has to go back to the House, so the House can vote to approve those amendments and authorize it to go back to the Senate for consideration with those amendments. And I believe that that's what happened when it went back to the Senate. After the House approved the amendments, it was ready for a final vote in the Senate. And the Senate leader, Paige Cortez, did not call the bill for a vote. We have reason to believe that it would have passed in the Senate, and I believe that he did push it to a point where it did require 2/3, and then eventually I think he didn't call it for a vote, and that's where it died in the Senate. And so regardless of exactly the procedural machinations here, there's no doubt that if Paige Cortez had wanted to call the bill in the Senate, the votes in all likelihood would have been there, but he didn't call it. And so the bill died on the full Senate floor. That's my understanding of it.
And again, it passed the House so easily. It would have passed the Senate. It passed last year. This is something the people of Louisiana wanted. And this is Paige Cortez putting his thumb in your eye. Are you going to vote for him for lieutenant governor?
Bell Edwards said, no, the people of Louisiana don't want this. And I thought, gee whiz, how can he say that when 80% of the voters voted to change the Louisiana Constitution in 2013? You know, how can he say that the people don't want this? You know, sometimes I don't think he had any, he could prove what he said. But they told me, his secretary told me, McCormick's secretary said that he thinks that Bell threatened to pull some pork projects on some of the senators if they voted for that. He was going to yank their little pork deal, and I know some underhanded stuff does go on, and that's why it never got through the Senate.
Alan, you can say what you want about John Bell Edwards. He's done a lot of harm in the state of Louisiana, but he knows how to play hardball politics. He rules through fear, terror, and threats. And that's, my opinion. That's
what McCormick think happens.
Thank you for the
Thank
call,
you.
Alan. I appreciate it.
All right.
I want to go through one more. Chris, I hope you can stay for quite a while. I'm going to come right back to you. But the one that gets me, that makes my blood boil, and next I'm going to ask you which one most upsets you, is this House Bill 12 by Representative Freeman. That said, that once the governor declares an emergency or a disaster or a public health emergency, that either the House or the Senate can cancel any part of the emergency or the entire emergency by a majority vote of the House or a majority vote of the Senate, although it says after consultation with public health specialists.
That's right.
That one's kind of strange to me, because if it's a hurricane declaration and you're asking are the roads safe, why are you talking to public health specialists? But the point is, we see that you put it beautifully. Let's see, you quarantine healthy individuals, thereby destroying small businesses. You infringe the right of religious worship. You contributed to a dramatic increase in mental health issues and suicides across Louisiana. And Page Cortez, who, again, I keep saying this, he wants to be our lieutenant governor. He killed this.
Yes, he did. And the most important part of the bill is that the bill would have allowed either house by a majority vote to terminate all or part of an emergency declaration. In other words, there may be parts of an emergency declaration that are good, but there are parts of it that are not good.
Right. It gives the legislature, in essence, a line item veto over the entire declaration.
That's exactly right. And Republican Page Cortez killed the legislation in the Senate. There's no question about that. And it's very, very upsetting to many people because of all of the coercive practices and damage that was done to people throughout that emergency declaration and the way it was handled. That this might be one of the top 2 or 3 most important bills of the entire session.
Oh, absolutely. Page Cortez is saying that he is okay with tyranny and suspension of constitutional rights.
That's right. And he's our Republican leader. And it's just absolutely shameful.
Well, look, I can't speak for Africa or Asia, because I understand that the rhino is an endangered species, but they are alive and well in the Louisiana legislature.
Indeed, they are. And I'm going to talk to you about a couple of other bills here that are real important.
Please, start with one of the ones that really infuriates you, please.
Okay. All right. I think you talked a little bit about 811 earlier when I was listening in. That was Blake Miguez's bill.
Yes.
And it fell one vote short of passage after Cortez had pushed it in the Senate to the point where it required a 2/3 vote. It's still almost passed, but Cortez ensured that there were not enough senators in the chamber when he called it for a vote. So he orchestrated the demise of this bill. No question about that. And it simply would have kept private money out of the electoral process with regard to people who actually conduct elections, commissioners of election, clerks of court, registrars of voters, that sort of thing. Money can only come from the government to fund elections. And that bill was defeated. So right now, there is no legal prohibition in Louisiana to a Mark Zuckerberg coming in here in a critical election and injecting tons of cash into our electoral process and swinging votes fraudulently.
And let's face it, he's not going to give the money to a St. Tammany or a Jefferson or any Republican strongholds.
That's exactly right. He's going to give it to the liberal districts where they can swing elections in favor of Democrats. There's no question about that. Let me tell you one other one that I think was extremely
Okay,
important.
hold on. Before you get started, I'm being told we got 52 seconds left in the segment. I hope you can stay with us. I mean, if you want, I'll ride you well into the next hour. This is, to my mind, a critically important article. If you love Louisiana and you want to know the truth, Please stay with us. We'll be back for the last segment of the 9 o'clock hour on Ringside Politics with a Punch with special guest host Big John Mason and special guest Christopher Alexander. Stay with us, please. All right, welcome back to Ringside Politics, and today we have a very Louisiana-centric show. I just checked my email, and someone said, well, I don't live in Louisiana. We're going to talk mostly about Louisiana because we are here in New Orleans, and these are ideas for your legislators, is how I would like to look at it. Does your state have it where you can cancel an emergency declaration or part of an emergency declaration? Does your state have a law that requires Department of Health to say whether there are fetal-derived cells in a vaccine? And we've just scratched the surface. I could easily spend 2 hours on every bill in this article and why they're important, but anyway, we've got Chris on. We've got another caller. We've got Steve from the country. Hey, Steve, what's up?
How you doing, Big John?
It's another day in paradise.
Yes, sir. Very excellent show as usual. Keep it on the home front. That's what we can change the easiest. Keep it on the home front.
Yeah. Improvement begins at home.
Yep. Sooner or later, we got to look at it, is a lot of the legislators, whether they're Republican or Democrat, are all taught in the same universities.
That's very true.
They all hang out with people of like values, and we've learned in war that there's people who pretend to be anything, but they're actually the enemy, and we've learned that. But we still think if the word Republican's there or Democrat is there, they're going to act a certain way. And so we haven't learned very easily. The other thing is, if it has anything to do with money, you can throw political parties out the window. And we should know that definitely in Louisiana. I mean, look at the wind farms. That's a Republican idea. That was a Republican
As a
bill.
matter of fact, that's the last one in the article that actually passed. And when we're finished, I want to have Chris talk about that at the end because it's the only one in the article that passed. And it did so without full disclosure, in my opinion, and I'm sure in Chris's too. But, Steve, to get to your point, the one that did pass is all about money and lack of transparency. And there's a new survey out, Dartmouth grads. Dartmouth is one of the Ivy League schools. That's supposedly where we send our best and brightest. I'll just read you. I'm not going to go into it right now because I want to spend some more time with Chris. But the headline is, 8% of recent Dartmouth grads are conservative, survey finds. That's right. 39% said they were very liberal. 36% said they were somewhat liberal, and just under 8% identified as conservative. So these are supposedly our best schools, and they're just indoctrination factories. You hit the nail right on the head, Steve, as usual.
Well, I really like your guest. The thing is, the outside money's always going to come here. It always have, until we, the people, draw a line in the sand, and we immediately tell people, keep doing this. We're going to ruin your political career and everything else. You're not going to run it for anything in this state. You're not going to do anything because you're killing us and you're making yourself fat, which is the same thing the federal government does. Look at Joe Biden. How many years has he been making himself fat? So why do we go through these mental gymnastics and not do something, especially when you have a guest like you have that wants to tell you what's wrong? And why do we, we're like the man who runs around the wall and he gets hit in the forehead with a ball-peen hammer. 2 days later, he says, maybe the guy's gone. He runs around the wall and he gets hit in the head with a ball-peen hammer. We keep doing the same thing, looking for different results.
Well, Steve, even though I'm on Ringside Politics, which, Jeff is the dean of New Orleans talk radio. He's been doing this the second longest in the state. He's got a bigger audience than I do. But even then, people are going to hear this and they might enjoy it. But the word's got to spread by word of mouth. Everybody listening has got to say, hey, man, we really shouldn't vote for Paige Cortez for lieutenant governor. Or if you got any friends that lives in one of these parishes, hey, your senator did us wrong, or hey, your rep did us wrong. Most people don't do their own research because they're busy trying to feed their families. They're trying to make a living. They don't like politics. They don't want to talk about politics. But I promise you, politics affects your life far more than most forms of entertainment, than most medical shows. Politics is critical. Well,
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Well, thank you for the call, Steve. And I want to segue into House Bill 594, and I want to bring Chris on this. Beryl Amity had some really excellent bills, Chris.
She surely did, John. She had some great bills, and one of them was perhaps the highlight was HB 594, as you said, John. And all 594 did, and by the way, Beryl Amity is a great patriot and a great legislator.
I've had her on my 1 o'clock show. I think she is very impressive.
She's wonderful. And all the bill did was codify what is essentially a constitutional guarantee of bodily autonomy. And it basically said that every Louisiana citizen has the fundamental right to make their own health care decisions, including the right whether to be vaccinated, whether to undergo any kind of medical procedure. And it prohibited the government from interfering in any way with the exercise of that right. And you would think that's very straightforward in a supermajority Republican legislature to pass that bill. And yet it was killed. It was killed, John, in the House and Welfare Committee by a vote of 11-5. This very straightforward, very much needed bill. And the Republican chairman of that committee, Larry Bagley, who's from Caddo, DeSoto, and Sabine parishes, he initially voted to kill the bill, and then Representative Republican Thomas Presley from Bossier and Caddo followed suit, along with Christopher Turner, Republican from Union Parish, and Wayne McMahon from up in Bossier and Webster.
I notice these are all North Louisiana representatives.
Correct.
What does North Louisiana have against the right to say whether or not you want or don't want the COVID vaccine?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I believe that perhaps they're beholden to a special interest group, or perhaps they got pressure from the governor. I don't know exactly what the reason is, but whatever the reason is, they didn't do their duty by the citizens.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to let you pick it up and start the next segment and have you do some more talking, but first hour is up. It's time for the news break. Stay with us. We're going to continue this fascinating topic on Ringside Politics with John Mason.
Time anywhere. Smartphone, TuneIn Radio app, WGSO.com. On the AM dial at 990, we are WGSO New Orleans.
USA Radio News with Lance Pry.
Citing Article 6 of the UN Charter, Ukraine's President Zelensky said Tuesday Russia should be expelled from the United Nations. And he called for an international tribunal to investigate the actions of Russian occupiers on Ukrainian soil. Wisconsin's Democrat Attorney General filed a lawsuit Tuesday challenging the state's 173-year-old abortion ban, arguing that statutes passed in the 1980s supersede the ban, and it's so old that modern generations never consented to it. Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul.
There are a series of laws that were passed subsequent to Roe that provide regulation for lawful abortions in Wisconsin. Those statutes are directly inconsistent with Wisconsin's 19th century abortion ban. It can't be both legal and illegal to provide an abortion to protect the health of a mother.
USA Radio News.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-333-1750. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-333-1750. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-333-1750. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds, too. Call 800-333-1750. 800-333-1750.
Republican incumbent Governor Kevin Stitt and Democrat Joy Hoffmeister won their respective primaries for the Oklahoma governor's election in November. Ms. Hoffmeister is the Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Both races were called fairly early, a little more than an hour after the polls closed. Her escapades and exploitation of young girls lands her 20 years in prison.
Convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell is being sentenced to 20 years in prison for helping Jeffrey Epstein abuse underage girls. One of her victims, Elizabeth Stein, was in the courtroom as Maxwell, dressed in prison blue scrubs, heard her fate. Prosecutors had wanted Maxwell to be sentenced to between 30 and 55 years. From the USA Radio News Phoenix Bureau, I'm Tim Berg.
The USFL Football League Championship game is Sunday evening. Birmingham Stallions will play the Philadelphia Stars in Canton, Ohio's Pro Football Hall of Fame Stadium. USA Radio News.
Oh, morning showers and thunderstorms about a few spots, and some of those redevelop. Some of the range could bring heavy downpours, so watch for that if you encounter some thunderstorms today. It's a high-end chance, and we'll continue with the likely chance tomorrow and again Friday, Saturday, too, each day. Overcast conditions, too, prevail, keeping the temperatures in check. Upper 80s to near 90 today, overnight near 80, and it's back into the upper 80s each day with that good chance of rain Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Ralph Sanji, WGSO. Gemstones, minerals, fossils, fine jewelry, hourly door prices, a 2-day auction, and more. Win a beautiful amethyst cathedral. Drawing tickets $1 a ticket or 6 for $5. At Baton Rouge's annual Gem and Mineral Show, August 13th and 14th, 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. The Bar Dixon Expo Center, Gonzales. Admission $5, kids 5 to 12, $3. Military personnel free with ID. $1 off scouts and uniform. More info on the Baton Rouge Gem and Mineral Society's Facebook page.
Bless That Auto.
Do you need your windshield repaired or replaced? Whether it's a simple chip or you need an entire windshield replaced,
Bless That Auto. 50% off windshield replacement.
For cars, trucks, and SUVs.
504-509-1668.
Our mobile service comes to you at your home or office. Automotive glass fixed while you wait.
Bless That Auto.
Bless That Auto has you covered.
504-509-1668.
Hi, this is Sidney Lee with AC Ambulance, and for over 40 years we have been taking care of your AC and heating needs. We proudly recommend Daikin equipment backed by a factory 12-year parts and labor warranty. So if you are in need of a repair, replacement, AC or heat checkup, don't take a chance, call the ambulance. That's AC Ambulance with the best financing in the industry. So call 467-1400. That's 467-1400.
The views and opinions expressed during this show are those of the hosts and guests only. In no way do they represent the views, positions, or opinions expressed or implied of WGSO 990 AM or North Shore Radio.
And welcome to another edition of Ringside Politics with a Punch, and your host, Jeff Crouer. Jeff has 18 years of broadcast experience under his conservative belt. He's the host of Ringside Politics with a Punch, writes for townhall.com, and has a new book, America's Last Chance. Jeff even has his own YouTube channel. But even with all that going on, he hasn't forgotten you, the listeners, the ones who opine weekdays right here on WGSO. Call Jeff Crouer now at 556-9696.
All right, guys, in case you're just joining us, this is Big John Mason, the best-looking talk show host at WGSO, filling in for Jeff Croer. And my special guest today is Chris Alexander. And in case you're just joining us, I was listening to Chris talk about House Bill 594 by Beryl Amity that would prohibit the government from discriminating against you if you did not wish to be vaccinated. And this went to a Republican committee, the House Health and Welfare Committee, where it failed. And Chris, if you'd be so kind, would you go through the Republican representatives that helped kill this bill?
I sure will, Big John. Despite the history of government coercion in our state and misinformation associated with the COVID vaccine, and the increasing evidence of adverse effects from the vaccine, 4 Republicans killed this bodily autonomy bill in committee. And the 4 Republicans who killed this very important bill were Republican Chairman Larry Bagley. He's the chairman of the committee. He's from Caddo. He represents Caddo, DeSoto, and Sabine parishes. So he was one of them. Republican Representative Thomas Presley, who represents from up in my area, where I'm from, Bossier and Caddo parishes. He was one. Representative Christopher Turner from Lincoln and Union parishes, and Representative Wayne McMahon. They all voted against this vital legislation. If they had voted for it in committee, John, the bill would have passed out of committee 9-7 and moved into the full House. But because they didn't, it failed 11-5 and never got to the House floor for a vote. I think this is absolutely reprehensible because every Louisiana that I know, the vast majority, believe, not that they're opposed to vaccines, but they believe that we have a core individual right to make that decision for ourselves. And this bill would have codified it in our statutory law. They killed this bill, these 4 Republicans, and it is very important that the constituents in those districts are aware of that.
Yeah, and Chris, we're labeled anti-vax if we don't want to get the COVID vaccine. I don't consider myself anti-vax. I have every vaccination except the COVID vax. To my mind, and I know you don't necessarily agree, a vaccine like measles, mumps, rubella, or chicken pox or smallpox, those are generally good for life.
That's right.
This
That's
vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting it. I don't think it should even be called a vaccine.
Well, and you make a very, very good point. But what they do, John, as you just correctly alluded to, they misdirect the issue by saying we're anti-vax. We're not. We simply believe in the constitutional right of individual self-determination. And that is what it comes down to, that people have a right to make that decision for themselves. And guess what, John? I know you would protect the right of any citizen who chose to get the vaccine.
Absolutely.
The government doesn't have a right to prohibit an individual from getting a medical procedure either. It's not principally about the vaccine. It's about the precedent that's being set when the government gets to tell a private citizen what medical procedure they have to undergo or not undergo. That's what this is about. And that's why it's so important that this bill should have passed, and it should be law in Louisiana right now. Now, of course, it could have been vetoed by the governor, but the point is the Republicans still had an obligation to put it on his desk.
To the people that elected him. And to me, this leads straight into House Bill 117. And this bill just would have made it unlawful for the government to prescribe an FDA-approved therapy for off-label use. And I want to stress, this is not experimental drug that hasn't been tested. These are FDA-approved. And, of course, most people understand I'm talking about things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. But would you tell us about 117?
Absolutely. That bill was brought by Representative Eccles, John, and it was very straightforward. It simply said that the government may not prohibit a doctor, a qualified medical doctor, from prescribing an FDA-approved therapy for an off-label use. That is a decision that a doctor should have the authority to make in consultation with his patient without being penalized or retaliated against by the governor, the CDC, a medical board, or the Louisiana Department of Health.
Well, in other blue states, they are taking medical licenses away from doctors that prescribed FDA-approved drugs to try and treat COVID because they didn't toe the orthodoxy. Do we want to be like that?
That's exactly right, John. And you alluded to ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. How many people died who didn't have to die because they couldn't get the early therapeutics that could have saved their lives? This is a real tragedy that this bill died, and it made it all the way to the Senate, John. I'll give you one guess as to who refused to call this bill for a vote in the state Senate.
Let's
I'll give
see.
you a guess.
I'm drawing a blank page.
I'm
guessing it was Page Cortez.
Yes, he did not call it for a vote, and so it died without a vote. And every conservative voter in Louisiana, especially in his Lafayette district, needs to know that. This was an extremely important bill.
To be the speaker or to be the Senate president, you're generally in your third term. That's why Page Cortez is running for lieutenant governor, because he can't run again for the Senate. So we're going to give him control of a major branch, a major state office with a big budget, and trust him to bring in tourists when he pulls this kind of, pardon my language, crap.
I couldn't agree with you more. Let me tell you about one other, unless there's another bill in particular you wanted to talk about. I wanted to mention HB 47 from Representative Kathy Edmonston, who's a great representative from out in Ascension Parish. And this bill would have required a Louisiana school or daycare to accept a written statement from a doctor submitted to the school saying that the student, for health reasons, cannot get the vaccine from their doctor. They would have had to accept that at face value, or they would have, or a written dissent from the student saying, I object to the vaccine on religious or other grounds. They would have had to accept that, and the bill would have also required that all the rights of exemption be included anytime the LDH put information out there about vaccine or immunization requirements. Much, much needed bill, because so many people in Louisiana were not aware of the fact that they could exempt out of the vaccine, John.
And you're right. And I know someone that has an immunocompromised child. Their immune system is deficient. And what this bill says, correct me if I'm wrong, is if a medical doctor says this child has a weakened immune system, he or she should not have this vaccine, that would have to be honored. So
yes, it would have to be honored without being second guessed at all. They would have to take and there was a time in this country, John, when guess what? A treating physician's word was taken at face value.
At law. I mean, yeah, it was given great deference. You want to talk about following the science? This doctor says, hey, this kid should not have it.
That's right. And Senator Cortez did not call Representative Edmondson's bill to a vote in the Senate. It had passed the House committee, and the appropriate Senate committee went to the full Senate floor for a vote, and Cortez let the clock run out and didn't call it for a vote.
I mean, that is just amazing. And while we're on the topic of school and daycare, this leads over to HB 531, and I am amazed at some of the Republican names that didn't object.
I am too, John. It was a bill that would have required that the legal remedy, if a school fails to honor a vaccine exemption, that the legal remedy be included in the same section of law in our state law that where the exemption itself is included. And you would think that would be a logical and very straightforward law. But nonetheless, the bill died in the Senate Education Committee. Senator Mark Abraham, Republican from Acadia, Calcasieu, and Cameron and Jefferson parishes, he's a Republican, made the motion basically to kill the bill because Republican Senators Robert Mills Republican Senator Beth Mizell and Republican Senator Kirk Talbot failed to object to Abraham's motion to involuntarily defer the bill. They just kept quiet and didn't say a word.
And the last two are generally pretty reliable on voting on conservative stuff.
They really are. And again, and they've done some good things. The purpose of our survey is simply to let the voters know exactly what they're doing. This was an extremely important bill, and they killed it. These 4 Republican senators were decisive in killing this legislation and not getting it out of committee.
I mean, that is just amazing. You're trying to kill someone else's bill, and you sit there and watch it.
Abraham, Mills, Mizell, and Talbot.
See, articles like this, Chris, are why I'm going to run for office next year. I'm going to make an announcement sometime later in July, but if you are listening, there has been at least one bill that I imagine you find amazing that it did not pass with the support it has. Let me shift gears a little bit on you. We've been talking about schools. Let's talk about the school board. How about 984?
Let's find it.
It's, again, Beryl Amity, one of my favorite representatives.
Yeah. And it came, John, Representative Amity's 984, that legislation. Well, you know that school boards have been notoriously non-responsive, John, to the concerns of parents. They've tried to foreclose the opportunity for parents to be heard before the school boards. Some school boards had even begun the process of approving policies that banned parents and the public from speaking at their meetings, believe it or not. And so this bill was necessitated by that. The bill would have required at least one school board meeting per month to just basically have a general public comment period that's not limited to any specific items on the agenda. If a parent wants to go in and raise a concern, they would have the right to do that.
In other words, this helps the school board suppress the parents' opinions and viewpoints. The parent just wants to talk. It doesn't change anything. It just says, your opinions aren't important. We're not considering them. And one of the excuses given, we'll talk about this. I can't believe the first segment's over already. Stay with us. You're listening to Ringside Politics with a Punch, guest hosted by Big John Mason with special guest Christopher Alexander. We'll be right back. Please welcome back, guys. It turns out that I am a political radio show talk show host, and I am a political columnist, but I haven't written a book called America's Last Chance. I am Big John Mason. I am filling in for Jeff Crouere. I have attorney Christopher Alexander with the Louisiana Citizens Advocacy Group as a special guest. And we are talking about laws, conservative laws that the people of Louisiana really seem to want that didn't make it out. Now, I've got another call. We got Ron from Tremay. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Hey, good morning. How are you all doing?
It's another day in paradise.
Awesome. I wanted to call about the January 6th committee that they have in Washington. I just wanted to get an opinion from you both if you have a moment. What do you think they're really trying to do? Are they trying to make it to where Trump and anybody who supported Trump can't run again?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with a saying that is attributed to Adolf Hitler, who insisted till the end that Poland invaded Germany. He said if you say something loud enough and long enough, there are people who will believe it is true. That's why I'm always telling people I'm the best-looking talk show host at WGSO in attempts that one day it will be true. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. I'll ask you, Chris. I think the intent is to make sure that Trump is so damaged that he can't run again.
I think, John, that is a very, very viable explanation for it, because I think they're afraid of Trump, and I think that what you just said is a primary reason. And I think another reason, Ron, is that they're doing anything and everything they can from deflect from the disaster that they are. And the last thing they want is Americans focusing on failure after failure after failure of the Biden administration. And so if they can deflect the public's attention with this for as long as they can, try to stretch it out to the midterms, they think that will help them in the midterms. I think it's all political, but I do not believe that the American people are fooled by this.
Well, no, I can prove they're not fooled. Yesterday, there were primaries in Colorado, Illinois, Oklahoma, and Utah, and the Trump-endorsed candidates were a perfect 12-0. That means for this campaign season, the President Trump's endorsement record is 144-10.
Wow, that is unbelievable. That is astounding.
And again, this was one of the things that I was going to talk about, but again, I can't get past Christopher's article. And no, he didn't pay me to say this, and I don't owe Chris any money. But this article names names. This article shows you what the legislation is. And thank you for the call, Ron. Did you have anything else? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it.
Let me finish up on 984.
Sure, absolutely.
Representative Amedee's bill. My understanding is that bill died on the House floor, led by Republican Representative Buddy Mincy, who is beholden to the teachers' unions. He strongly opposed the bill that would have opened up access by parents to communicate with the school boards and designated certain periods of time for open public comment. Republican Buddy Mincy out of Livingston opposed that bill, and I think the Republican voters, conservative voters in his district, have a right to know that.
Well, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, if at least 15 residents of a school board district put it in writing that they wanted an item added to the agenda, that within, 2 months of receipt of the 15th written request, it had to be put on the agenda. So this gave parents some real say-so on what the school board would consider.
That's exactly right. What you just exactly recited what that portion of the bill says. And again, this was a bill designed to create and establish the authority and the right of the parents to communicate with their school boards, the people who are directing policy with regard to their children.
And correct me if I'm wrong, aren't school boards elected?
Yes, indeed.
And where do they draw their funds from?
Us.
And yet they don't want any input from us? I mean, they're saying when Representative Mincy opposed this bill, he said it would make school board meetings, quote, contentious and long. Let me go to the first point. Is politics supposed to be kumbaya harmony, or is it about vigorous debate to determine the public policies that are best for an area?
It's about vigorous debate, back and forth to come up with the good solutions.
Exactly. So making them contentious, and I'm not talking about, I don't want people fighting. I'm not advocating for violence or screaming or anything, but vigorous debate is a cornerstone of our republic.
Amen.
And long, most people would say that the most important thing in their life is their children. So can you spend too long talking about something that affects your kids and their education?
I don't think so, especially when they're trying to teach certain things in our schools that are harmful and poisonous.
Okay, I know we're coming up on the bottom of the hour break, and I can't be moved. Let me see if I can squeeze Roy from Kenner in. Hey, Roy, what's up?
Hey, what's up, Big John? Yeah, listen, at January 6th, all it is trying to disgrace Trump again, hurt Trump, stop him from running if they can, but that's all that's about. These lunatics, they're holding a committee, and if you flip one channel over, the Dow Jones is down 900 points. Now, I don't know what reality these people live in, but your economy's crashing, your cities are crashing. Oh, by the way, could you have on one of your shows one time just have some of the 48% of the people who said LaToya Cantrell is doing a good job and they approve of her. Could you have that one day?
It's hard to find someone who can intelligently, honestly debate or describe why they think the mayor is doing a good job. Most of the people I ask, they just say, oh, she protected us from COVID. How? You think shutting down was the way to, get us out of COVID? It's really, and I'm not trying to be insulting, but most of the time when I ask people about LaToya, it gets visceral, it gets emotional. People get offended if you dare to question. If you say to me, oh, what makes you think Trump is doing a good job? I'll immediately start talking about the things he's done, the policies. I don't start screaming, Trump is the best, or Orange Man good.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, I would love to have some vigorous debate with someone that thinks LaToya is doing a good job. Someone that thinks, hey, our streets aren't flooding. Someone that thinks, hey, it's perfectly fine we get our garbage collected once a week. It's perfectly fine that the next sports team might be named the Carjackers. It's hard to find people that believe that sort of stuff.
That's a good name, the Carjackers. All right, Big John. Yeah, have a show one day. I want to meet and hear these people trying to defend this lunatic in New Orleans. All right, buddy. See you.
They're hard to find. They're not exactly coming out of the woodwork. All right. Wow. Bottom of the hour break coming up already. In case you're just joining us, I'm Big John Mason. I'm guest hosting for the Dean of New Orleans Talk Radio. And my show will go till 11, or Jeff's show will go to 11 today, and my show will be on at 1. So you get 3 hours of Big John Mason today. And my special guest is Christopher Alexander with the Louisiana Citizens Advocacy Group. If you've missed some of this show, you can go to WGSO.com, click on podcast, click on Ringside Politics, click on today's date, and you can hear the full interview with Chris Alexander. You can hear everything we've talked about on the podcast page. I also covered a lot of this, although without Chris, yesterday on the Big John Mason Show. All right, please stay with us. We'll be back for the last half hour.